Sorry, a couple of minutes late. We had some, I think everybody's had a very busy morning so far, and we're gathering troops because, of course, we had a bit of issues with flooding. So well done to all the team for getting the room ready again and fit for use this morning. So I'd welcome members of the public and those viewing on the live stream. Please can I remind you that face masks should be worn when you get up and move around. It is now okay for you to take them off while seated. So in the event of an evacuation alarm sounding, everyone should vacate the building through the nearest exit and proceed directly to the assembly point. So members, please make sure you have all your relevant paperwork and or devices to hand as we follow the meeting this morning. So apologies for absence. Are there any Pippa?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Bashir and Councillor Gulnawaz. We also have apologies from officers from Wendy Ogle-Wellborn, Sue Grace, Steve Cox, Joyty Attry and Amanda Arscombe. Charlotte Palmer is present as substitute for Steve.
Thank you very much. So item number 2 then, are there any declarations of interest for today's meeting? I see none. So we shall proceed to the next item on the agenda this morning, which is item number 3, minutes of the last meeting held on the 21st of June 2021. Do we have any comments or corrections, or are they taken as a true record of the meeting? Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Peter Hiller proposing, Ray Bisbee to second. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4 then this morning. Are there any petitions to be presented to Cabinet today? It appears not. So thank you very much. That will be noted. Okay, so we'll move on to the substantive business of the morning. And the first item is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Minerals and Waste Local Plan. It's found in your document pack on pages 11 to 264. This will be introduced by Councillor Peter Hiller and no doubt Charlotte Palmer instead of Steve Cox. So Peter, do you want to introduce your item?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Leader. Cabinet may recall over the past couple of years or so, we've approved for public consultation draft versions of a new minerals and waste local plan for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. With full council support, the plan was also submitted to an inspector for an independent examination. Following the rigorous examination process, I was very pleased when earlier this year the inspector approved our plan, subject to a relatively small number of modifications. We're now able to adopt the Minerals and Waste Local Plan and use it for decision making. Only full council is able to adopt the plan, but I'm asking Cabinet to recommend council does so. During July, Cambridgeshire County Council will be going through a very similar process towards adoption. Now, you may not think that the minerals and waste element of our council is particularly exciting, but I must remind you, I feel it's important to remind you that this is a very significant document, and not just for making sure that we can secure the right minerals we need from the right locations to support our planned growth agenda, or making sure we manage our waste in the most sustainable way possible. The document also is important for wider matters, such as the creation of wildlife sites. Indeed, some of Peterborough's best and most protected wildlife sites are former mineral sites, such as Dogsthorpe Star Pit SSSI. Our recently much heralded local Land Dyke Countryside Trust actually came about 20 years ago as a way of working with mineral and waste operators to reverse the decline in wildlife. It now manages 7 reserves, including the 80-acre Eton and Maxey pits. We mustn't forget that Must Farm, just outside Peterborough, one of the greatest national archaeology finds of recent decades, was only discovered because of the extraction of brick clay. Without careful, well-planned extraction, Must Farm would either have been found or lost in the extraction process. If done so properly, therefore, minerals extraction is not just about digging sand, gravel and clay out of the ground and filling the holes back with waste. If done properly, as we do here in Peterborough, it can be about exploring the past and creating habitats for the future, about heritage, discovery and education now and for future generations to come. Leader, members, this updated Minerals and Waste Local Plan will make sure that it is exactly what we continue to do right across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I therefore fully commend the recommendations to Cabinet, and Peter Kay, you'll all know Peter Kay, Richard Kay. Peter Kay.
I was going to say there's a remarkable resemblance, even with these glasses on.
I do apologise. You wouldn't mind being a couple of thousand behind him, I'm sure. Richard Kay, Peter's brother, is here today, should Cabinet have any detailed questions. Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And sorry to put the wind up Charlotte. She probably thought she was presenting. So, indeed, Richard, do you have anything to add to Councillor Hiller's introduction?
Nothing to add, thank you, but I'm obviously here to answer any questions.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
members, who has questions for our well-known comedian friend at the end? Andy Cole.
Thank you very much, Leader. I won't be asking any questions about misheard lyrics, but I was very pleased to see the local plan has got to the final stage. However, I note the inspector is asking for some modifications before we can adopt the plan, and I note you're recommending we accept all of them. Indeed, you state we have to if we want to adopt the plan. So could you just confirm that those modifications are not of any concern to us, please?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Councillor. We have been asked to make a few modifications. That's completely normal and happens to all local plans across the country. In fact, the number of modifications we've got in this plan is quite low, relatively speaking, which is good news. And I'm happy to confirm they are relatively minor in nature. And predominantly they're around clarifying the wording so that everybody's absolutely clear what those words mean, what those policies mean, rather than any fundamental shift in policy approach. So I'm absolutely satisfied they're fine to adopt and shouldn't be of concern to us, and our county council colleagues are of a similar mind. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Ayres has a question, I believe.
Thank you, Leader. I'm also pleased to see this plan's reached such a successful outcome, and even more pleased to see that you've done it under budget, which is showing how successfully you've prepared it. But looking at the proposals, am I right in saying the plan can also help us achieve our wider climate and biodiversity ambitions?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Councillor. That's what good plans are all about, not just focusing on the core issues of what it's there to do, which obviously in this case is about the minerals and waste activities that we do, but it's looking at the wider agenda. And as touched on by Councillor Hiller just now, minerals and waste sites can provide excellent biodiversity outcomes as well. As Councillor Hiller just said, they're not just digging holes out of the ground, they can create some really biodiversity-rich wildlife sites, and biodiversity-rich wildlife sites in turn are also act as excellent carbon sinks as well. So they're a double win there for us. And so at this plan we have pushed that further. We've been good at that in previous plans as well, but this plan just pushes that agenda another step further. So yes, absolutely, this plan does commit us to those issues. Thank you.
Councillor Tereste.
Thank you, Leader. I note that this plan is a joint plan with Cambridgeshire County Council. What happens if the County Council decide not to adopt it?
Thank you, Councillor. Yep, there's always a risk when you do something jointly with another partner that, and it would unfortunately be the case that if the County Council decides not to adopt it, that we wouldn't be permitted to adopt it either. We're not expecting that, but if it did happen, we would have to revert back to our current minerals and waste planning policy framework that we've got, but that's obviously now somewhat dated. So I'm not expecting that to happen, and likewise, County Council colleagues are not expecting Peterborough City Council to not adopt it. But that's just a small risk we have to take when we're preparing a joint plan. But we have to balance that small risk with the considerable benefits of preparing this plan jointly with our county colleagues, particularly on a topic such as minerals and waste, which are very much done at a more sub-regional scale rather than necessarily just a local scale. It certainly works better at that sub-regional scale. And we've worked very well with them now for decades on this topic. So it is a small risk, but it's one certainly worth taking, and we're not expecting the County Council to not adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simons.
Yeah, a wider question, but it is related to this agenda item. I'm just wondering how the national planning reforms are coming along and what effect that would have on this minerals and waste plan, assuming it's adopted by full council later in July.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The planning white paper which you refer to was issued in the autumn. It's actually gone fairly quiet from government on that now. We've not heard anything formal as to its next steps since then, other than the Queen's speech included reference to a planning bill to be brought forward in this Parliament, which is obviously a reference back to the planning white paper. So the honest answer is I don't know the full implications of that because we haven't seen even a draft bill yet emerging for the new system. But what I'm expecting, highly expecting, is there will be transition arrangements within that. There always is for planning when the planning acts change. So I expect this plan, even with not knowing what the full implications of that new planning bill will be, that this plan will have many years of good life in it, and actually will probably tie in quite nicely to when the new system requires us to prepare an update to that new local plan. This will probably be coming towards the end of its, or in need of an update anyway. So I'm satisfied that that there won't be any significant implications to this plan. But in the meantime, I have no further update on the national position.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Richard. I've got a question that's more wide-ranging rather than specific. I mean, this is an excellent plan, which I'm happy to support, but I do have a strategic, get the word out, query. The maintenance of these sites, these extraction sites, going forward, they are then purposed as nature reserves, but it seems no one wants to take possession of looking after them, and the cost burden then falls on the City Council to try and keep them tidy. Do you have any thoughts on how we purpose these sites for nature reserves without being a cost burden to the city?
Thank you, Councillor. This certainly shouldn't be a cost burden to the City Council, and that's not what we would set out to do with any permissions we're granting now. I'm not sure precisely which sites you're referring to. Maybe they're quite historic sites, but certainly more recent sites, and I'm talking the last decade, and moving forward, we would put in place very strong measures in terms of not only what should the site be restored to, and so therefore once the developer walks away, the mineral operator walks away, it's in a good state already, but then there would also be a long-term arrangement financed by them to how that's done could be very much a side-by-side basis, but it can often be 20 or 30 years of annual, either a lump sum payment or whatever arrangement to make it happen. So what you described shouldn't happen. I'm not aware it is happening in certainly of more recent sites, and I'm confident this plan has all the policies to make sure it doesn't happen in the future as well, if that has happened in the past. So we do have some excellent sites, as I say, both planned and under construction now, or I say under construction, minerals being taken now with very good restoration plans. Can I just add, it's not always the best solution to turn them into nature sites. Mostly, yes, that's we tend to what we aim for, but sometimes returning them to farmland can be a solution. So there's a couple of sites in here where if the landscape is of particular historical importance, for example, a nature site might not actually always be the best solution, but we tend to aim for nature sites with a long-term management arrangement to go with it.
I feel a follow-up coming on.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Richard. I will be specific because the nature reserve is in my ward, a rural ward. It's iGreen Nature Reserve, which Peterborough City Council struggle to maintain to high standards because the people that were supposed to be looking after it long-term walked away. Okay, return it to farmland, great, but if we're going to have nature reserves, we need a long-term plan to look after them. I'll just put that on the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. I think that's the questions exhausted. I've not seen any other indications of anybody wishing to speak. As Councillor Hiller rightly pointed out, not the most exciting of subjects for many, many people, but for those that are watching and listening, and for our members of the media present, this is just one of those important things that goes unseen, unheard, and mostly unread by the large majority of people. But it is a vital policy for the City Council, and it's just a great document, a lot of work, and officers must be commended for the efforts that they put in terms of refreshing this, and we should take it forward. There are a number of recommendations on page 11, you'll find. Unless anybody really wants me to read them out one by one, they are items 1 through to 7, and may I suggest we take those all agreed en bloc, unless anybody has any further comment on those. Is that agreed? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members, for that. We shall then move on to the next item of business today, which is item 6, making of Glinton Neighbourhood Development Plan and Barnock Neighbourhood Development Plan, following a successful referendum outcomes. You'll find that on pages 265 to 390. Again, Peter Hiller will no doubt want to introduce, and maybe it might be Charlotte this time, who knows? But it's certainly Richard Kay again, so stay seated. Peter, over to you.
Yes, thank you again, Leader. I'm delighted to introduce the second item to Cabinet today. And unusually, much of the hard work has not actually been done by this council, but instead by 2 very hard-working parish councils and their local communities, namely Glinton Parish Council and Barnock Parish Council. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to confirm to Cabinet that all that hard work has not only paid off, but it's been resoundingly endorsed by their local electorate. In Glinton, a resounding 88% majority voted in favour of its neighbourhood plan, and in Barnock, the vote in favour was even more convincing at 90% in support. These overwhelming majorities are a clear signal of 2 excellent, locally based and locally prepared plans, and I have no doubt they will prove their worth as part of future planning decisions in both parishes. Both plans have involved extensive consultation, been subject to independent examination, and then finally a referendum. The plans cover a wide range of matters, such as protecting local green spaces, providing design guidance for new homes, and making sure supporting infrastructure is provided alongside new development. Importantly, all these policies are tailored specifically for their parish to meet the needs and desires of those parish and the people that live in there. Of course, for myself personally, I've followed closely the progress of Glinton Neighbourhood Plan. It's in my ward. And I really do know how much care and attention and effort has been put into its making by all involved, supported, of course, by our own planning officers to make sure all the steps were taken in the most effective way. Again, it's for full council to formally adopt these plans, but I fully endorse them, and I ask Cabinet to recommend to full council that both plans be adopted on the 28th of July. Richard Kay, Peter couldn't make it. Richard Kay is here today, should Cabinet have any detailed questions. But I can I also add my thanks to Emma Naylor, our Senior Planning Officer, who's worked with the 2 parish councils and will continue to help any other parish council that wishes to prepare its own neighbourhood plan. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Peter. So, Richard, anything to add?
No, again, nothing to add at this stage, but again, happy to answer any questions.
A man of few words. That's what we like. People say that about me, not. Okay, members, so it is your turn. So where we last left off with your quizzing, we'll go straight back over to Councillor Allen to quiz you some more on this subject.
Thank you, Leader. No quizzing on this occasion because I'm delighted to see these 2 plans pass their referendum with such large majorities, and I congratulate both parish councils. And indeed, I commend the idea of a local plan, of a neighbourhood plan, to other parishes in Peterborough area, and I think that we should encourage that to happen. But can you just remind me, however, how these 2 plans fit with the local plan that we adopted in 2019?
Yes, of course, Councillor. They very much work together and complement one another. So obviously the Peterborough Local Plan of 2019 sets planning policies for the whole of the Peterborough area. But what's special about a neighbourhood plan is it focuses on its own neighbourhood area and sets very clear policies for them, something which a Peterborough local plan clearly couldn't do for every single parish, etc. So, and in terms of determining a planning application in where you have a neighbourhood plan adopted, such as Glinton or Barnet, hopefully in the next couple of weeks when full council makes that decision, a decision maker in planning must, in law, give the policies of the neighbourhood plan the same weight as the Peterborough local plan. So again, it just emphasises that there is that crossover between the two and that they do work together and are on a par with one another. Thank you.
Oh, he's got a follow-up again.
Can you just tell me, however valuable these neighbourhood plans are they always in the best interest in the city in general?
I would say so, because these are about making sure that planning decisions in those areas are not only appropriate because they've got an up-to-date policy framework for them, which has been tested independently as well, so they're not obviously policies that are inappropriate. But the most important is then when a planning decision maker is making a decision in those areas, they have a much greater confidence that it's what those people want in that area because they've developed the policies, voted on those policies, and therefore naturally one hopes planning committee or planning officers will follow those rules as they must do so. So yes, I would say it is for the benefit of the city, or at the very least it certainly doesn't harm the city. I would argue in most cases it's of benefit. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm interested in the creation of neighbourhood plans. It's so impressive to see what these parish councils have put together, what expertise they must have called upon in their local area to get this done. But I'm interested really in the constraints. Is it the fact that you talk about the framework of the local plan? So if they work within that framework, they can basically outline whatever policies they want, providing they are within that major framework. Is that correct, or are there other constraints they have to take into account?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it's there is a framework that they do have to take into account. So there are some rules and regulations, obviously, with all these sort of things, of what they can and can't do. Generally speaking, it is quite flexible in that there are no rules to say that they must do something. That's the first, I suppose, the first rule. There are some rules around what they can't do. So to start with, it's about what do they want, and they go about setting about what areas of planning matters they're interested in, whether it's new homes or protecting nature sites or whatever it might be. And then what we do as the planning officers is make sure that they're not straying into something that they can't do. So we don't try and influence them into the things that they want to do. We try and influence them to make sure they do something that the rules say they can't do. So there are certain rules, as I say, that they're not permitted to do, which is either set by national policy of what a neighbourhood plan can contain, or, and it's coming back to the question we've just had actually, what they can't do is undermine our own local plan in any significant way. So, for example, if the Peterborough local plan set policies to say a certain parish had to have a certain number of homes built in its area, a neighbourhood plan can't come along and say, we don't want any homes, because that would be undermining the plan. What they can do is say they want more homes, and that's perfectly acceptable, but what they can't do is kind of undermine our strategy, the wider strategy we've got in our plan. So it's a yes and no answer. Yes, it is very flexible. There's no set template that they must follow, but there are certain rules that they must avoid certain things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ayres.
Thank you. I'm interested to see these two plans have been prepared by parish councils, and I think other adopted neighbourhood plans in the Peterborough area have also been by parish councils. But not the whole of Peterborough is parished. So can you please explain a little more what happens in non-parished areas?
Yes, certainly, Councillor, you're right. Including these two, our previous neighbourhood plans are all parishes, and that's very common across the country, that it's predominantly neighbourhood plans are predominantly prepared by parish councils. The reason for that is, well, there's probably a number of reasons, but predominantly I think it's parishes have a head start in the way the law is set up for preparing neighbourhood plans, in that a parish council already achieves a number of the steps along the way to preparing a neighbourhood plan simply because it is a parish council with a defined boundary, and therefore, but elsewhere outside of a parish it is more complicated because first of all, a boundary has to be drawn up for where the neighbourhood area has to sit, for example. So effectively for Peterborough, you'd have to nominate within the urban, predominantly the urban areas, not parish. So you'd have to find a boundary that is suitable and agreed before you can do anything. And then a formal neighbourhood forum would have to be created and set up. And again, there's various regulations and rules about what that forum is. So often what can be the case is where there is interest within an urban area, a non-parished area, those first two hurdles are just too much for a local community to even get over because of the formal rules that are in place. Whereas in a parish, they're already established from the start. But it's not impossible. So here in Peterborough, for example, we've had a couple of areas that have at least gone some way down the route. They haven't got as far as a neighbourhood plan yet. So Woodston and Warrington have both made at least some steps towards preparing a neighbourhood plan. So they've both had an area defined, and Warrington have actually taken that second step. They've created a Warrington forum, a formal one, which we've approved. So that then gives them the go-ahead to prepare a neighbourhood plan for Warrington, should they wish to do so. They don't obviously have to do so now, despite taking those steps, but they now at least can do. So, in short, anywhere, parished or non-parished, can prepare a neighbourhood plan. It's just a lot easier in parishes because of the governance arrangements that are already in place in a parished area. Thank you.
And finally, I think, Andy Coles.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, Richard, thanks very much. Being a councillor for Woodston, I know how difficult it's been for the community to pull together, and it's great to see the structure of a parish council makes it so much easier. My concern would be, much as we talked about in the Minerals and Waste Plan, was about the impact on national planning reforms and whether that's going to have a negative impact on what are currently clearly defined characters of villages.
It's a good question. As I say, we're all we have so far from government is the white paper that was issued, and we were expecting by now a response to that to understand in more detail what that might be and what the planning bill and planning acts might be. It's safe to say that, well, if the white paper is followed through as it suggests, it's safe to say there will be a fundamental change to the planning system. I've no doubt about that. And that could have an impact on our rural areas as much as our urban areas and how we plan, both in terms of plan making as well as decision making on plans. But in terms of neighbourhood plans, for example, the white paper is very clear in a number of places that neighbourhood plans are here to stay, and therefore we assume that they will be, but we expect that the rules for preparing such neighbourhood plans will probably change in the same way that the rules for preparing the Peterborough local plan, for example, will change. But it's impossible for me to say until that legislation starts to emerge, which I'm told we're expecting around January, the first planning bill to come out. But again, I've not had that confirmed in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further hands being raised on this item, so if we could turn to the recommendations, which are on page 265, 1 through to 4, I believe. And I think I'll take all those as read, unless anybody's got any objection to any of those or any further comment. Is that all agreed? Agreed. That again is unanimous. Thank you very much, Richard. And I'm surprised you've not got any more to do today. I'm sure we can make some other things up for you if you like, just so you get a little bit more airtime in the chair there. We shall move on to the next item on the agenda this morning, which is the item 7, Cycling and Walking Member Group Working Group Recommendations. And you would have had a supplementary pack for that, which is agenda item number 7. So indeed that is... Lewis Banks and indeed Peter Hiller again to introduce. Have you got any opening remarks, Peter?
No, I don't on this item, Leader, so I'm more than happy to pass over to Lewis if he wants to make a few comments.
So, Lewis, if you just want to set the scene or anything, it's entirely up to you, or you can move straight to questions, whichever you like.
Okay, I didn't have anything specific to add beyond the report, so I'm happy just to take any questions or comments.
Okay, all right. So there are a number of questions that have already been tabled to me from a variety of members again, but I'm going to kick off with Councillor Howard, who was actually on the working group, I believe. So, John, do you want to start with your questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, my question is, obviously it's an exciting time for cycling and walking at the moment, and just an indication of what the plans are for the future plans for walking and cycling in Peterborough.
Yeah, so we're currently drafting our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which is a government-backed initiative, which is looking at origin and destination type trip factors, and essentially it will give us a network plan to show where future investment, cycling and walking infrastructure should be implemented. So yeah, that's currently being drafted at the moment, and then the intention would be to go out to public consultation in the coming months.
Thank you very much. And I think next on my list, I have Councillor Walsh.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, really, it's about the rural areas I'm interested in, and what sort of plans do we have about the green wheel in those particular locations?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So at the moment, that local cycling and walking infrastructure plan that I mentioned, it is a government-backed initiative, so that's very much looking at the urban areas, so where it's shorter journeys, and obviously you've got the potentially the most amount of people walking and cycling to work, to school, etc. So I think once we've got that plan established, then I think then it gives us a great opportunity then to look beyond the urban area and looking at the rural area, the green wheel, and all the different connections that are needed there. So then that would then be a process of mapping all of that out. Obviously, speaking to lots of different people and organisations, and then coming up probably with a prioritised list as to where that investment should be targeted.
Oh, a follow-up.
Yeah, a follow-up, not to my question, but going back to the first question about this government plan. Could you, I may have missed what you said, but can you give timescales? When are we going to see that plan emerge?
Yeah, sure. So it's in draft format at the moment, and what we need to do, though, is to actually undertake some technical work, because there's some economic factors that go into it in order to give each score a kind of a rating, if you like, based on its cost-to-benefit ratio. And we're expecting to receive some DFT funding shortly, some capability funding of about 300k of revenue. And within that bid that we've put through to government, we said that we would use a proportion of that to develop our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan further. So we're expecting that funding, I think, either later this month or early next month, and then we've probably got about a month or so of work, and then obviously there'll be an internal review process to be undertaken, and then obviously if everybody's happy with the plan in the draft format, we would then look to go out to public consultation.
Thank you. I have Councillor Simons next.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Can you provide further information on the Thoughtwood cycle scheme, please?
Yeah, sure. So that was one of the schemes that was reviewed by the working group, and I think I'm right in saying, Councillor Haldane said it was supported by everybody as being a good scheme, and as a scheme that the city should be looking to to develop and to install. Essentially, it's an on-road cycle scheme on Thoughtwood, going from about the footbridge, which is near to where the Woodman pub is, and then it would be going round then along Thoughtwood, making a key connection into the business park. I mean, I think what's good about it is that obviously it's connecting in Longthorpe and the off-road cycle route network there that goes all the way through to the boathouse, you know, into the Ortons as well. And then there's that key link there that it would fix, if you like, going into Fairy Meadows and going further afield into the Bretons as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ayres.
I'm particularly interested as the Cabinet Member for Education in the recommendation 2 about the school streets project. Can you give us an update on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So we've got 11 school street initiatives currently operating in the city. I think, you know, by and large, they all seem to be very successful and are supported definitely by the schools. I think see them as a real asset. So what we're looking at the moment, though, is to, you know, if with the recommendation then, would be to progress with those and to make them permanent, because at the moment they are under a temporary traffic regulation order, which is time sensitive and cannot be renewed under a temporary basis. In addition to that, we've also got 6 expressions of interest of other schools that we're currently in discussions with them to see if we can go about implementing school streets with those schools as well.
Can I just ask them? Yes, can I?
You can ask as many questions as you like.
Thank you very
That's
much.
what he's here for.
Yes, I was pleased to hear about those expressions of interest. Do you actually go to all the schools and invite them to be interested in this? Because I think it is a particularly sound and good project for traffic around our schools, particularly on the estates as well. So do you go and invite them to get involved?
Yes, we've gone out and communicated directly with all the schools, to try and encourage them to you know, take us up on the offer.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Tereste, please.
Thank you, Leader. What about money, Lewis? It's a conversation we've had a few times. What about funding opportunities to deliver this stuff?
Yep. So at the moment, then we've got what's called the Active Travel Fund Tranche 2 from government, which is the funding that's been allocated to us, which is obviously within the report there talks about you know, some of the options you know, for some of those schemes. Moving further forward then, government has just announced tranche 3 of walking and cycling funding. So they've just sent out the guidance now, which is quite a bit of it, so we're just reading through that at the moment. And then obviously looking into the future, obviously government has announced 2 billion for walking and cycling, so we're expecting obviously, you know, further funding to be released in further years.
Thank you, Marco. Councillor Allen, I believe, has a question.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, Lewis.
Morning.
We put a lot of temporary schemes in place when we were unsure of the ramifications of COVID transmission. Can we now review some of these schemes? And I'm talking in particular to the temporary footway barriers on the Broadway Westgate junction, which were to widen the footpath and stop people parking. I don't think they've really achieved what they meant to achieve. And if we think they have what we wanted them to achieve, can we widen the footpath and put it in as a wide footpath, or can we revert to what it was before, which was a hybrid of footpath and parking?
Yep, absolutely. It was only ever put in as a temporary measure. So it's really up to Cabinet whether we want to make it permanent, or if not, we can remove it really quickly and easily.
Thank you very much. I think that was indeed the last question on this subject, I think. Indeed, I am right. So, members, are there any other comments before we move to the recommendations? Because I think collectively we might have some thoughts about what we do next. If I just may, Andy, go on, you want to say something?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's just around the working group recommendation around the Crescent Bridge, really.
Okay.
It's an area I live, and I actually use it when I cycle. knowing how busy the Crescent Bridge gets normally with normal traffic, of course we can't predict exactly how things will be, but if we were to go back to normal and the sort of pre-Christmas rush and so on, I can imagine that being very difficult in terms of congestion throughout the city. So I'm just wondering what your views are from the recommendation, but whether my concerns about Crescent Bridge are well founded in terms of future congestion.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, obviously, that's a key risk, I think. You know, we don't know, obviously, what's going to happen in the future in terms of traffic levels and going back to normal. Obviously, we know they're still down on the pre, you know, COVID levels. You know, we know obviously how many vehicles are using it today as well, so it's still obviously key busy routes. So yeah, and obviously it is on a public transport route as well. So yeah, so I can't really answer that too directly because it is a bit of an unknown at the moment what the future of that would be, assuming traffic goes back to normal levels.
Thank you very much, Andy. What I was just going to say, referring actually back to John Howard's question, if the question was asked of me as leader, and it's what are our plans for walking and cycling, I think encourage people to do more of it. So I think that we are wholly behind any cycling and walking initiatives, and I'm pleased to hear, Lewis, that we are developing a new version or a fresh version of that plan that might try to encourage more of that behaviour. But I think what we might do if we turn to the recommendations of the report, and forgive me because I'm having to flip between pages here, that from canvassing colleagues and others, what I would say is that we would want to adopt a different scheme than Crescent Bridge. I've also asked members of that working group, and I think to say it was unanimous was perhaps slightly stretching the point, because there were differing views. And given the wider concerns around the long-term aspects of that, I would say that we remove that now and look to fund, and I want to be very clear here, we should look for safe cycling routes into the city. And what we have at the moment on Crescent Bridge, or indeed Town Bridge, London Road, is not acceptable in terms of ongoing safety and keeping pedestrians and cyclists separated. So it seems to me, in asking around colleagues, that the sensible thing to do would to pursue funding, perhaps say for a bridge on the side of the bridge that is specifically for cyclists. And in relation to, you know, we have plans around the station quarter that may also alleviate some of that traffic and indeed cycling over that bridge when we redevelop the what would be the western side of the railway. So that's something to look forward to. But if we as a council could pursue the idea of a bridge over the bridge and look for funding to do that, perhaps from government or the combined authority, or, you know, part of our regeneration plans for the station quarter, I think that would be a better longer term solution. So what I would ask that we do today is that we switch the emphasis to the Thoughtwood route on recommendation A, and that you are tasked to pursue that line of basically taking up road space for cycle space, because I don't think what we have at the moment is going to be an ideal solution for anybody, and I am looking to the future. It may not be today, so it's been great to do and we should encourage more of it. So are we all agreed on that proposal for item A, that we go with the alternative route? Is that all agreed? Okay. On recommendation B, I think we're all unanimous in terms of we should continue the School Streets programme where it's safe and appropriate to implement. Are we all agreed on that? Okay. And then item C, I'd like to propose an amendment to the draft terms of reference in Appendix 1. A number to be determined, that we have representatives from the City Council by political proportionality in any future working group, should we establish one, reflective of the political makeup of the Council. So item 8, in the terms of reference, which I've now, of course, put down somewhere else, there they are. which would read item 8, procedures of the, I know it says climate change working group on your paper, but that's actually just a typo. It would of course be the cycling and walking member working group. So it would say up to a number to be determined, which I'm happy to discuss amongst ourselves and with other parties, but it may be 5. But it could be more dependent on the interest of joining, but it will be politically proportional, reflective of the makeup of the council. So if Pippa's making a note of that amendment, could we agree to that? Is that all agreed? Oh, is it for me, Fiona? 1 second, Councillor Allen. So that's the recommendations. Before I take a final, Steve, did you want to come in?
I would just like to clarify what we would be voting on if we accept what is before us. Item 1 states to accept the recommendations of the working group as set out below, or item 2. We're voting on item 2 to accept some of the working group recommendations.
Indeed.
Is that correct?
That is, it's some. So what we are saying is it's not the working group's recommendation for Crescent Bridge, it is the alternative. So we are proposing an alternative to that route, of which Lewis outlined in his comments. I think a question was asked of him about that. So that would mean removing the Crescent Bridge temporary. Shall we? I will stress the word temporary, because in fact it does say, and they were meant to be temporary, they've served a purpose, but the one at Thoughtwood would then become permanent. Am I correct? Just yes, indeed. So with that, we would then make that permanent. Item B, the school streets programme, we've agreed, and item C as amended in terms of the terms of reference, that yes, we can establish a new permanent cycling and walking member working group, but the terms of reference have been amended to make it proportional in terms of the council's political makeup. Are we all clear? Okay, I think, and they were all agreed, unless anybody's dissenting any further. So I do want to stress we are committed to improving cycling and walking and encouraging more of it, but we've got to do it sensitively and what makes common sense and is most and works for everyone really, rather than just taking a skewed angle on it. Thank you very much. Okay, we shall move on to item number 8, which is an update to the Climate Change Working Group's terms of reference, pages 391 to 394. This primarily relates to the privacy issues, as previously agreed and discussed at full council. So, if anybody wants to take that up, I think it is. Is it you, Charlotte, or is it? It's Lewis again. I don't know who's the luckiest, Lewis. Okay. In fact, I can't see your name on this paper at all, unless I'm looking at the wrong thing. No, I'm not. But anyway, Lewis, you fire away. Oh, it's Peter. Oh, it's Nigel, sorry. Nigel, yeah. Indeed, Nigel, it is you.
It is me, Leader, yeah, thank you. I'll keep it brief like Richard did earlier, or Peter, whatever his name was. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges we face for our communities and our council. The Council's Climate Change Working Group has an important role in providing a cross-party steer on our response to the climate emergency. Council recently voted to hold evidence-gathering sessions of working groups in public. This gives our residents the chance to see the information we use to make our recommendations. I would like to propose that the terms of reference for this Climate Change Working Group are updated to reflect this. There are also some minor edits to wording, however, none that significantly affect the working of the group. My recommendation is that the Cabinet approves this revised terms of reference. Thank you.
Ooh, any questions? I think we probably do have. I think I have Councillor Bisbee first.
Thank you, Leader. It's great to hear what you said about evidence. My question is, are there any plans for evidence gathering meetings on the working group? Because you work by evidence anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, would you like me to say on, Councillor Summers? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we've got the next session is actually planned for this Thursday, and we've got invited speakers as well to come in and you know, to provide evidence on our tree planting targets. So the experts include a representative from the Forestry Commission, PECT are bringing an arboricultural consultant, and we're hopeful of having a third group as well represented at the session.
Struggling with my microphone this morning, apologies. So, thank you, Ray. I have Councillor Howard now, I believe.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to know, what's the climate change working group been working on and focusing on most recently? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. The working group is obviously set up to provide recommendations to decision makers on all aspects of the Council's response to climate change. So this is to both reduce carbon emissions across our own estate as well as emissions across the city as a whole. So the working group has recently made recommendations on how the city-wide carbon management action plan should be developed. This includes establishing a partnership group with key local stakeholders vital in the delivery of a zero-carbon Peterborough. The partnership group will be established in the coming weeks and will play a key role in the development of the action plan, which we brought to Council this year.
Thanks, Lewis.
Thank you very much. Any questions from anybody else? It appears not. Pull my papers back together. I keep burying them. Sorry about that. So, there are some recommendations that Cabinet approve the updated terms of reference for the Climate Change Working Group. I'm happy to propose these with the same amendment we just made for the previous group, that we have political proportionality on this group in terms of the terms of reference. So, members, it would be, as I read out to you a moment ago, at item 8 in Appendix 1 under the terms of reference, a number to be determined, but it will be representative of the political makeup of the council rather than just one member from each party as it currently is at the moment. So with that amendment, are we happy to agree the updated terms of reference? There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, and I think we're closing in on the end. Lewis, I can't believe that you're going to be next for the next item. Let's have a look. Item 9, which is the Budget Control Report for May 2021, and this has got to be Andy Coles. I'll be very surprised if it wasn't. Andy, do you want to introduce the item?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's me. Just to go through the Budget Control Report for May 2021, Peter clearly is with us to answer any questions later. But just to go over the overall position, it's the May report I present to you, the first financial monitoring report of 2020-21. We don't normally bring the April report to Cabinet due to the level of year-end accruals, reversing in month, and all of the end of financial year work that's undertaken. The overall position is a 3.7 million overspend position against the budget. So the main variances that make this up are, on the positive side, we're an extra 2.03 million up in financing due to the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough business rates pool being agreed for an additional year. There's an additional 1.3 million one-off amount agreed with the Council's actuary, which has resulted from the closing pension figure from the Council, taking back Vivacity on the 30th of September 2020, and the underlying pension surplus figure at that time. Estimated lower parking charges due to reduced footfall in the city and environment enforcement services. There's 1.5 million reduction in adult social care due to rising service demand, care market support and staff costs to reduce the pandemic caused backlogs. There's 2.4 million estimated additional costs due to rises in children's placements and other children's care services, and £1.2 million within housing services due to the additional costs there. You'll also see an item on COVID-19 and its impact on the budget report. So The ongoing impact is roughly, during 2021 we reported 30.2 million of additional COVID-19 expenditure, offset by 32.2 million of additional grant funding. We incorporated an additional 8.1 million in 2021-2022 in the adults and children social care costs because of rising needs and the demand caused by COVID-19. We note we have experienced a delay in anticipated service demand for a variety of reasons, but the May 2021 monitoring now expects a combined further £4.6 million pressure across these areas. So that's £2.7 million higher expenditure than pre-COVID. The budget already incorporated one-off grants of £6.3 million in the COVID-19 response fund and £1.6 million in local council tax support funding. However, this year the government have continued to financially support Peterborough with the following COVID-19 related activities. We get £1.2 million infection control and rapid testing fund to reduce virus transmission and re-enable close contact visiting. There's £6.7 million of containment outbreak funding, including amounts carried forward from 2020-21 to ensure compliance with restrictions. £0.2 million of welcome back funding to support businesses and communities to reopen safely. And there's also a £0.3 million winter grant scheme for family food, fuel and support costs. £0.6 million emergency active travel grant to improve the walking and cycling facilities, as we've spoken about already. And further support for lost fees and charges over the first quarter of the 2021-2022 financial year. And just to look at page 399, item 413, just a slight error there. The Council's collection rate for business rates income is 2.03 behind target for 2021-2022, which is in improved position against the reduced collection rates the Council experienced in, that should be 2020-2021, not 2021-2022. We've received £8.3 million of restart grant to support the economy to reopen and recover, and as of the 30th of June, £7.1 million has been allocated to businesses, which is an excellent, speedy turnout of those grants to local businesses. The Council also had £5.8 million of additional restrictions grant to distribute initially by the 31st of March 2022. However, the Government has now made available additional ARG funding if the initial allocation was all allocated by the 30th of June, and I'm delighted to say that we've been able to allocate 100% of the initial ARG by this time, and we have been successful in getting our application in time. Due to the significant increase in material change in circumstances appeals against business rate amounts due to COVID-19, the Government have announced it will legislate to rule out COVID-19 related material change in circumstance appeals. Local authorities will be allocated a share of a £1.5 billion grant to support those businesses most affected by the pandemic. The legislation is still to be passed, and at this detail, the full detail of the schemes in relation to Peterborough will be fully understood. Retail, hospitality and leisure business continued to receive 100% business rate support during quarter one, although this will reduce from July to a lower level of support. Updated bills will be issued in July. Council business rate collection levels are 2.03 behind target, and this is an improved position over 2020-21, where there was an 11.5 million of uncollected business rates income. Only 81.8% were collected against a target of 97.9. This sum has now reduced to 7.3 million as of the end of June, and there is a recovery plan to reduce this balance further. Council tax collection is presently 0.1% above target, but local council tax support payments are rising. There are 528 since the start of the pandemic, which is a 6.9% increase, and 243 since the start of the financial year. Therefore, Leader, I ask that the Cabinet notes the present overspend position, the 2021-2022 COVID-19 implications, and the key variances are set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Comprehensive as ever. Mr. Carpenter, do you want to input at this junction, or do you want to move to questions?
Happy to move to questions, Leader.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Celeste indicating that he wanted to speak first.
Thank you. So where do you think we'll be at year end?
If I start there, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Celeste. This is projected out to May, and as we refer to in the report, demand is estimated at the moment, and the true picture won't be fully understood until the social distancing requirements cease or are relaxed, and we return to the new normal, whatever that new normal is. We estimate this latent demand we're referring to in the 21 outturn report, which is what a lot of this is based on. But we now must be careful to ensure its real magnitude is understood and it's reflected in the financial performance monitoring. Income losses, including parking, are also impacted by this, and we will be interested to see what happens post 19th of this month when things start to change potentially. Given we added 8 million to the base budget this year and there's still government initiatives for COVID-19 expenditure, we're hoping that we will reduce this overspend position over the next few months, but at the moment this is where we think we are. I don't think it's out of line with what a lot of other councils are saying as well. I mean, there's a lot in the press about latent demand at the moment, and councils across the country having to deliver to it. We now need to just make sure we understand how that goes over the next number of months.
Thank you very much, Pete. Councillor Ayres next.
Thank you. Can I ask you, will we be required to use all the £13.7 million set out in the budget as a capitalisation direction to balance this year's budget, Peter?
Apologies, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Ayres. At the moment, we will be required to use all of that amount to balance the budget at the present time. Although we do have an MHCLG team that is just about to start work in looking at our financial position, and obviously they will validate whatever the numbers are as we go through the process over the next month or so. However, part of the overall fund, which was 20 million in total, was actually to help us to move to overall financial stability and sustainability, and so it will be interesting to see as those discussions go on over the next couple of months where that takes us.
Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Coles, for the comprehensive introduction. I think the item I'm going to ask a question on is covered off in papers 4.3, but I would ask why we have the two credits in resources and financing, and why were these not anticipated in the budget?
Thank you, Councillor Allen. The reason they're not both in the budget is at the time of setting the budget, we didn't have the final approval of either for their magnitudes. The councils across Cambridgeshire did sign up for the joint business rates pool, but we didn't get approval by the government until the end of March, and so that's why that wasn't included, because we couldn't do it until approval. With the pension fund amount, again, that is dependent on the closure of the Vivacity accounts for the as of 30th of September. That work is still ongoing, although we do have agreement from the actuaries that we'll be able to apply that. That amount will depend on the day it happens, and so once we get that figure, and again, both figures are one-offs at the moment. So the main reason being we didn't have solidity of those at the time of the budget to put them in.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walsh, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, could you outline what our plans are for the capital budget? Not too much has been said about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. This year the capital... Keeps not going on. Welcome, this way a bit. Press the red button, yes. This year the capital programme was set at £147 million, but we've also 16 million of slippage of schemes coming from last year, bringing the overall level to 163 million. Of this amount, 75 million is external funded and 88 million is funded by borrowing. Over the last 5 to 6 years, we have only spent 80 million a year on the capital programme, and so at the moment, through the officer-led RIT group, we are looking at reallocating and reprioritising to bring to this group a revised budget for this year, which is around the 80 million mark. 80 million is because it's a figure, it's not constrained by cash, is constrained by the resources available to deliver the schemes in the area. And those are road schemes, housing and other schemes. And that's the issue that we have, is there's just not the resources in the area to deliver to a higher level.
Yes, sorry, if I can just ask, when you talk about resources, are we talking about expertise, buying in those teams that would develop the plans to spend that money, or is it more than that?
Thank you, Councillor. It's more than that. It's end-to-end. It's people doing the planning, but also people doing the delivering. There's a finite amount of people out there that can actually deliver.
Sorry, one more on that, just sorry to press, but can we not use the capital budget to pay for that team of expertise that we would need to deliver it?
We are, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we are using the capital budget to do exactly that, but there is limited resource in Milestone, in the people who build schools, in the consultants that deliver housing and other programs for us, and so they don't actually have the additional resource to allocate. And that's the issue. There's just not the people to do the work to a level above about £80 million.
Thank you. Councillor Hiller.
Thank you, Leader. Morning, Pete. Looking forward to 22-23, we've got a 26 million deficit. What are your views on covering that? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. It's difficult to assess at the moment. I think the fairest way to come at this, and again, going back to one of my previous answers, it depends on how we move out of COVID-19 and the ongoing demand that COVID-19 causes. We moved into 2021-22 with a 14 million deficit and had plans in place for probably 12 million of that. However, that was impaired down to £3 million because of COVID-19, and the overall gap has now moved up to 26 million. So part of the MHCL review is to test our assumptions and ensure we've deliverable savings in line with what other councils do. However, our low unit costs and council tax levels allied to good service delivery outcomes are a good base for the council to start from. And so we do start from a very good place for our stakeholders in terms of affordable, cheap, but good services. However, part of the review that's going to go on over the next 25 days will come to a independent view of that in terms of what the council can and can't deliver, and by the end of September, start of October, we will have a statement from the Secretary of State to actually set out their view of our financial position and how they think we, in liaison with them and others, can move it forward for future years.
Thank you. Councillor Bisbee.
Thank you, Leader. As it underpins the Council's services funding and taking into account last year's deficit, what are your views on the business rates collection?
Thank you, Councillor Bisbee. I would be foolish to say anything other than worried, and very worried. I think the biggest issues we have are probably 40% of our businesses at the moment have had business rates relief, either 100%, and now that's moving down from July onwards. We don't know what that effect is or will be on them. Councillor Coles, in his introduction to the paper, talked about the material change of circumstances linked to COVID, but people will also be claiming that not for COVID as we go forward and come out of it. So there is a lot of uncertainty. We collect roughly about £100 million worth of business rates, of which 50% come back to us and the other 50% go into the government pool. It's something we have to monitor all the time. The Peterborough bucks the trends overall in terms of growth. So we've seen significant growth over the last couple of years, including last year. You know, the estate, the industrial estate right next to the A1 at the top of the parkway started to be used, and obviously there's significant money coming into us there. However, at the same time, we've got the issue with the ex-Debenhams warehouse, which of course we'll lose business rates on in the short term. So it's something we need to keep a weekly eye on to see how things pan out. But it is a massive issue, and again, it will be a bigger issue going forward, depending on what fair funding does, because the original fair funding assumptions were that we would be funded mostly from council tax and business rates, unless we go to the government and in the pool. So yes, something to be monitored on an ongoing basis very tightly.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands. I'd just like to make a couple of comments really from a financial perspective in terms of the council, the Conservative group and where we are. So I will reiterate for the public record that we are a well-run council financially. And I've said it before, it's not me that says that, it is our professional examiners such as auditors and others respect that we are a well-run council. Despite what the Labour Party leader may claim in his weekly columns last week, which is a slur on our professional officer team about their professional advice about what to invest in and how we run the council, they and their cohorts offer this council no solutions whatsoever to our well-documented financial woes, not of our making, but when somebody takes £60 million off your bottom line, you are left with stark choices. They only add to our troubles. They do not engage in finding solutions. But I, again, hold out the hand of cooperation to both the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party, the Greens and others within Peterborough City Council, and urge them to work with us for the benefit of all the residents in this city so that we find funding solutions that are for the benefit of everyone. This Conservative administration will keep this ship afloat whilst others around us are sinking. Our growth, as Mr. Carpenter alludes to, will continue at pace, as will the prosperity of the city's residents, so that Peterborough will go forwards and still is known as a place to come, live, work, raise a family and start a business. So Pete, again, thanks to you and the team and Andy and everybody else working hard on the finances in what are challenging circumstances that the City Council finds itself in. If I may now move to the recommendations 1 to 3. Again, I won't read them out. I'll take them as read if everybody is agreeable. They are for noting today. So are we all agreed on that? I think that's a unanimous agreement for that. And I think that brings us to the end of today's meeting. So may I thank you all for attending today. Thanks to all the officers for their continued hard work. It is greatly appreciated. And again, we don't often say to the team, both here today and the rest of the wider staff, that it is appreciated, particularly over the last, 14 months. It seems to have been a long, long time. That I know you've all gone above and beyond. And I would also say in closing, we may have had some heavy rain on Friday, of which this room, I did comment at the start what a good job the team have done, but I would also, because it is a public meeting, that we have a great deal of sympathy for those that were affected and flooded. I myself was one of them on Friday, and I know that our emergency services did their very best they could to try and assist everybody, but it was unprecedented. The amount of rainfall that fell in probably 2 or 3 hours, I've never seen anything like it. All I would say, if people are in need, do contact your local ward councillors if you still need some assistance. No promises, but they will do what they can to help you. And with that, I'll close the meeting, and thank you very much for attending.